So there was this one time when my daughters were about 5 and 7 years of age. We were at a bookstore and I was reading to them. And then I remember looking over and a group of children had joined them on the floor. And then a couple of the kids said, "Keep going, keep going." So it's not surprising that from a very young age we are drawn to stories and storytelling. Because stories help us understand the world around us, they help us understand who we are. Sometimes stories tell us what we don't want to hear, and stories often tell us what we need to hear. Hi everyone, my name is Sean O'Keefe and I am so incredibly excited to be here today. I'm also a little nervous, so please be patient with me. And I'm here today to tell you how sharing your story can change the world. Yes, you heard me correctly. How sharing your story can in fact change the world. So before I get started, I just want to let you know that I will be sharing my own story, and it's real and raw, and parts of it people might find triggering. So I'm going to ask you to kindly practice self-care and mindfulness and take care of yourself. So I'm going to take you back to the summer where I was 9 3/4, because if you remember, around that time of age, we always tried to reach up to the next age. So I was 9 3/4, it was the summer, and my parents would be going out on weekends and sometimes nights. They were social back then. And my parents asked him to watch over me, to take care of me, as he did that whole summer. My parents loved him, and I looked up to him. He was much older than I was. And I did what he said, because that's what my parents said. Listen to what he's telling you. So there was this one time when he said to me, "Let's wrestle." I said, "Okay, what?" Of course I said yes. And he said, "This is how adults express their affection for each other." And it was awkward and uncomfortable at first. He said I would like it. He also said that he loved me. So this went on for the summer. And I remember it was Labor Day, and we were at my parents' house. And we were in the kitchen, and my mom was there, and I turned to him, and I said, "Let's wrestle." And he tried to shoo me away, and his face looked as though he was getting mad. And then from that point on, I didn't see him that much. He wasn't around often. And I remember I spent years trying to get his attention and gain his affection again. You see, that moment in Labor Day, back on that Labor Day when I said, "Let's wrestle," I carried that moment with me for 40 years, because I interpreted that as being it was my fault, that I was asking for it, that I was the one who initiated this. And what I thought was love was grooming. What I thought was a relationship was abuse. And what I thought was sex was relationship. Now, mind you, I didn't come to this understanding until long after that, long into my journey. And what often happens with cases of abuse is a great deal of attention is paid to the event itself. Both the media, the legal system, they focus on the events that took place. Who was there? Who saw you? What do you remember? What were you wearing? And did you say no? As a child, I was 10 years old, and he was much older than me. He was a young adult. Why would I say no? And there's not a lot of attention, there's very little attention, in fact, placed on the collateral damage that the abuse leaves in its wake. And the collateral damage is different for everyone who is a survivor. For me, collateral damage looked like anxiety, hypervigilance, crushing self-doubt, and stuttering. I started stuttering about probably the year after that. And what's ironic about stuttering is I lost my voice. I lost my ability to communicate. And I stuttered for most of my teens. And it wasn't until I started college that reading helped me increase my vocabulary. And with persistence, I overcame stuttering. In fact, people said that I was articulate and I was a good speaker. But what I didn't understand at the time was that stuttering was the development of a coping strategy. You see, stuttering helped me deflect from my emotions, and it gave me another tool to hide that secret that I was carrying. The abuse and everything that surrounded that was a secret that I believed I would take to my grave. No one would ever know about that. One of the byproducts of self-doubt is people pleasing. And I was the best people pleaser in town. And the way that I people pleased is I used to wear masks. Masks gave me permission to give people what I thought that they wanted. And as I started my career, I was a little awkward with how to use the masks, but I soon figured that out. It helped me navigate social situations. The masks helped me navigate my career as well. Fast forward to the time when I was 40 years old, and I had leveraged my masks to position myself in a successful career. I was vice president with a Dutch investment firm, had all the trappings, the big salary, the bonus, the international travel, the expense account. Everything was going fine. And then tragedy struck. I lost my son. In fact, within the span of 2 years, I lost my son and I lost my father. So at that point, the masks helped me carve out a career for myself. What the masks didn't do is help me understand who I was. So I was really just a shell of a person. So when tragedy struck, I didn't just lose family members, people near and dear to me. I lost who I was. See, my son represented my future, and my father represented my past. They anchored me, or what I believed they anchored me. And I completely lost who I was. There was a year of just complete and utter tragedy and sorrow and grieving. And I didn't know it at the time, but the wall that I'd built around myself to protect me, the coping strategies, the tools that I'd used to keep myself safe and help me be successful, they stopped working. So I did what I did after about a year of that, is I hired a coach and a trainer, and I tried to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And instead of having different masks, I went about having one big mask. And that only lasted for maybe a year or two. And then everything just completely fell apart. I ended my marriage. I knew that there was something deeply wrong, but I had no connection to who I was to vocalize what that was. I just knew that something needed to change. So I ended my marriage, and I did what I'd done in the past. I ran away. I ran away from feelings, I ran away from emotions, and I ran away from the people in my life. And that continued for a couple years. And then there was this one time, January 2011, when I was in a hotel room in Hong Kong. And the memories just came rushing back. No amount of alcohol or whatever I was doing could stop those memories coming back. Everything came back, just like a movie where the camera pulls back and you see the wider angle. I asked myself, what if that event influenced the person that I am now? What if everything was connected? What if my decisions were in fact colored by that event? And I think that was the first time that I actually felt vulnerable. That was the first time that panic really struck me. So I sat down on a computer and I wrote out everything that I could remember. And the next day from Hong Kong, I got on the phone and called the school board asking if they still had my records from elementary school. I was asking, do you have any notes on my behavior changing around that time? I was at a point where I needed answers. I needed to figure out what had happened and what was happening to me. So shortly after I came back, I found a therapist who specialized in male survivors of childhood sexual abuse. And she helped me get into a group of male survivors. It's called group therapy. And that was incredibly tough. That was sharing my story with the therapist was a struggle. Sharing my story and everything that happened in front of a group of other men was terrifying. I don't think I'd ever felt that afraid ever in my life. And I think for the first time, I actually felt compassion for myself. For the first time, I felt vulnerable. And what I thought was going to be a 6-month exercise in healing took 6 years. And during that time, I had an insatiable need to understand. I needed to not just get to the bottom of it, but how do I heal? You see, because therapy doesn't fix you. Therapy helps you access what's underneath. And for me, group therapy represented peeling away years of shame and guilt that I had carried, wrongfully carried. And so this desire to learn and understand led me on a journey. And that journey consisted of groups, workshops, retreats, both in Canada and the US. I even went to Thailand and spent a couple weeks in a monastery trying to learn meditation. And what I discovered, what I uncovered, is that I didn't know who I was. All of this peeling away led me to believe that I'd been wearing masks for so long that I had no idea who I was anymore. And this was a terrifying experience. But I also looked at this as being an opportunity not to put the pieces back together, but to re-examine who I was and what that meant, and who did I want to be? What did I want to be, and what was the relationship I wanted to have with my daughters? So with the help of my therapist, I arranged with Abuse Hurts Canada, and I started up my own group called A Time for Men. And I ran that group for 4 years. And then in 2018, I approached Family Services of Peel here in Mississauga. And I started up a group with them. And that group continues to run today. And that's a weekly, now a virtual weekly group for other male survivors of childhood sexual abuse. And along the way, during my journey, I met some amazing and powerful and influential people, influential in my life. And one of them, his name is Dr. Howard Fradkin. He was contacted by Oprah Winfrey. And for those of you who don't know me, I totally fanboy over Oprah Winfrey because she managed to convert her abuse into jet fuel to propel her life story. So an opportunity had come up to be a guest on one of her specials. She was doing a special for the movie that was coming out on Michael Jackson called Leaving Neverland. And he sent me an email on the Monday. The taping took place on the Wednesday. The reason I'm talking about that is that was a pivotal moment in me changing my direction. That marked the beginning of my advocacy work. So I was not only just leading groups, but I was more active in the advocacy space. And that inspired me to start a business. And one of the things that I looked at during that time period of advocacy is, how did I do that? How did I manage to go from stuttering to being successful to where I am now? And I went back and I looked at moments in my life where I experienced successes and where I experienced struggles. And what the struggles revealed to me was that was times where self-doubt had been activated. And conversely, the times when I experienced the best success, the most joy, is when I felt my most authentic self. And what that told me is that the power had resided in me all along. So I came up with an acronym to describe that: power, perseverance. On my journey, I was determined to get to the bottom of this. Nothing was going to distract me from uncovering who I was and how to heal. Like I said, I threw myself into retreats and I wrote journals, and I wanted to uncover patterns of behavior that I believed were linked to what happened. Ownership. I had to own who I was. Owning my feelings, owning my emotions means that I have to understand who I am to begin with. And sometimes that can be one of the hardest things. Who am I? Willingness. I embraced everything that I wanted to be. I looked for change. I was evolving and allowing the change to wash over me. I'm not the same person that I was 10 years ago. And responsibility. I understand now that as my work has moved into advocacy, and that now that I have the power to affect other people, with power comes responsibility. So, like that moment where I overcame stuttering and I claimed my voice, I'm now here claiming my voice in front of you, sharing my story and telling you how sharing your story can in fact change the world. Thank you.